Okay, so this is Language and Identity Part 2, and now we're going to look at some other factors. We're going to look at how language interacts with culture in the discourse community or group identity. And then we'll briefly look at race, language, and nationality. And then I'm going to look at brand identity. That is the way that perhaps these days, as consumers, we take our identity from the particular products we consume. So let's look at group identity and membership in a discourse community. This is a study that was done on a group of high school students and Belton High School. And they looked at two different groups, the jocks and the burnouts. And they divided the jocks into girls and boys and the burnouts into girls and boys. And what they were interested in looking at is their particular use of language. And what they found was, when they looked at grammar, for example, the jock girls used the best grammar. They use better grammar than the jock boys. So the best grammar is used by the jock girls. And then the next best users of grammar are the jock boys. And then we get to the burnouts, okay? And no doubt in the high school that you went to, you had other words for burnouts. These are the druggies, the losers, the whatever it is, the term that was used in your particular high school. Next, they found that burnout girls and boys use about the same amount of non-standard grammar and more than the jocks, okay? So the jocks, both males and females, use better grammar than the burnout girls and boys. And that's not surprising. But what's interesting here is that they found an extreme group of burned out burnouts, as they call them. And these were girls. And the girls use the most non-standard grammar, more than the boy burnouts. So this was a kind of an ultra group of burned out burnouts, females, and they were marked by their use of non-standard grammar. And it's not because they didn't have the education, as mostly people believe stereotypically when people use bad grammar. The choice of the bad grammar was deliberate. It was a mark of identification in that particular group. So the same thing is going on in Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch, and he describes in a really nice piece his relationship of identity and language. Okay, so let's read that piece from Nick Hornby, Fever Pitch. Ever since I've been old enough to understand what it means to be suburban, I've wanted to come from somewhere else, preferably London. So if you remember, Nick Hornby comes from a little middle-class suburban town outside of London. I've already dropped as many H's, okay, as I can. So the H dropping. It's not the upping over horses, the erts, the horses, oos. So I've dropped just about every H in that particular piece that's used to practice H's. So he dropped all his H's as I can. The only ones left in my diction have dug themselves too far into the definite article to be winkled out. And I use plural forms with singular subjects whenever possible. So it's a deliberate act of changing the particular language to sound like an inner city kid. This was a process that began shortly after my first visit to Highbury, and it continued throughout my suburban grammar school career, and escalated alarmingly when I arrived at university. Nick Hornby went to Cambridge, so and this was in the 70s, 60s, 70s. So it was a backlash against upper class accents. So it was a mark of who you were if you could pretend to have a working class accent, which he maintained. And that was part of his identity, part of his rebellion. Similarly to the burned out burnout girls. Harvey also talks about the power of being in a group. So being in that group, he was able to talk like them. And being in that group gave him an identity which he could never have as an individual. So let's just read a passage from FIFA Pitch. But those who mumble about the loss of identity football fans must endure miss the point. This loss of identity can be paradoxically an enriching process. Who wants to be stuck with who they are the whole time? I, for one, wanted time out from being a jug-eared, bespectacled suburban twerp once in a while. I love being able to frighten the shoppers in Derby or Norwich or Southampton. I knew it wasn't me that made people hurry to the other side of the road, hauling their children after them. It was us, and I was part of us, an organ in the hooligan body. So he's not a hooligan, but when he's part of with all his mates in this larger crowd of football fans who appear to be hooligans, he has power, he has identity. He escapes the bespectacled twerp that he talks about at the beginning. Identity like this is very much a way that we can understand the kind of sectarianism between these two football teams, Rangers and Celtic. So Rangers, as you can see on the left, are sporting Union Jacks. They identify very much with the UK, with being Protestant. And as you can see on the right there, there's a certain identification with, because they're wearing green, this is Celtic, with Ireland and the Irish. Now, these are identifications. They're not really ingrained beliefs. This is the nature of sectarianism. Let me give you some examples of some chants. So this is Rangers. We are Rangers, Super Rangers. No one likes us. We don't care. We hate Celtic. Fenian bastards. Fenian is another way of referring to Ireland. Not Northern Ireland, but Era Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Would you like a chicken supper, Bobby Sands? Who is Bobby Sands? Bobby Sands, the famous IRA martyr who was imprisoned, a member of the Irish Republican Army who were fighting to unite Ireland. And he was in prison and he went on a hunger strike. And so, again, it's the classic othering of the opposing fan. Would you like a chicken supper, Bobby Sands? Would you like a chicken supper, Bobby Sands? Would you like a chicken supper? You dirty Fenian. Would you like a chicken supper, Bobby Sands? This is pretty awful stuff. And again, a classic one. Hello, hello, we are the Billy Boys. Hello, hello, you'll know us by our noise. We're up to our knees in Fenian blood. Surrender or you'll die, for we are the Brigton Derry Boys. Billy Boys means supporter of King William, who defeated the Irish. Part of the orange. The color orange is associated with the Protestants, the Orangists in Northern Ireland. If you look at the Celtic chants, There's only one Neil Lennon. He's the coach, was the ex-coach of Celtic. There's only one Neil Lennon. He's like me and you. He's an Irishman too. We're walking in a Celtic wonderland. So he, again, put the stress on the notion of being Irish. And even more, when the green flag is flying, which is the flag of Ireland, the Celtic will fight till they die, for we won't be mastered by no orange bastard. Orange, of course, is a reference to the Protestants, and a historical reference to the orange Protestants in Northern Ireland. Bless them all, bless them all. So a study that was done on this kind of sectarianism by Duker and Holligan came to the following conclusions. Most youngsters were extremely influenced by football culture and the Old Firm. The Old Firm refers to the kind of rivalry between Celtic and Rangers, which fostered memories of historical conflict in Northern Ireland. Memories, right? But it tends to be distortions and myths and legends. Football-related sectarianism related to family influences, machismo, and tribalism. So family plays a big influence on identity, depending on which family they belong to and which team that family supports. The singing of sectarian songs is seen as a sign of heterosexual male identity. It's very much a male thing. It's establishing yourself as a fighter for that particular team and othering the opposing team in terms of these religious political divisions. But notice this, young people have no interest in religion. It's not that they are devout Protestants or devout Catholics. They have no interest in it. It is just a marker of which side they're on. And more so, the young people viewed sectarian humor not as some kind of serious political or religious division, but as harmless banter. And finally, sectarian language is so deeply assimilated into young people's social identity that it has become normalized. So, in a sense, it becomes normal to take these, what seem to be very extreme positions, talking about Fenian blood and talking about all these things. It becomes normal because, in many ways, the supporters, the fans, have no real connection with these historical conflicts. It's just a badge. It's just the way that they identify, in the same way that we talked about the Yid army as being something which really has no relationship with being Jewish at all. It's just being a supporter. Next, let's talk a little bit about race, language, and nationality. So here's a picture of Mario Balotelli, who's a great soccer player, but also quite a mysterious and difficult personality. And one of the struggles that Balotelli has had is that throughout his playing career in Italy, not so in England, he's been hounded by racists and racist chanting. Recently, last year, he played in the World Cup. Italy didn't do so well, and a lot of the fans kind of targeted or scapegoated Balotelli for the fact that the Italian team didn't do so well in the World Cup. So these days, social media plays a big part in the kinds of ways that fans express themselves. So here's a typical tweet at the time. Mario, you're really not Italian. Go away. And of course, as Balotelli, who likes social media and is tweeting all the time, often gets himself into trouble, he responded, I'm Mario Balotelli, I'm 23 years old, and I didn't choose to be Italian. I strongly wanted to be Italian because I was born in Italy, and I have always lived in Italy. And he really is Italian, right? And he speaks Italian. His biological parents were Ghanaian, but he was adopted when he was a baby and brought up in an Italian family. So how more Italian can you be? But here, of course, he's not accepted. His identity he's not given the identity of an Italian because of his race. Just to look at the notion of race and the notion of whiteness. And the notion of white is something, of course, which is extremely relative. And when we talk about black and we talk about white, these are particular terms that historically have changed. And they mean different things at different times. If we look at the Greeks, and we've already mentioned this earlier, the Greeks thought anyone who didn't speak Greek was barbaric, and especially their northern neighbors, the Scythians and the Celts, and they had lighter skin. But it's interesting, the Greeks didn't consider that a normal color. So the preferred color was the Greek color, not the kind of pasty white northerners. If we look at this country, not surprisingly, the ideal of whiteness actually was those northern Europeans, those pasty white northern Europeans. So people like Thomas Jefferson and Emerson looked to the Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, as being their ideal whiteness. And of course you can take that to extremes. White is often associated broadly with being Caucasian, but then you can move to Saxon, which is a particular whiter shade of pale, if you want to understand that. And then of course you can go and pick out, well, something like Teutonic, and then Nordic, and then of course you get to Aryan, and then of course you get to the notion of that kind of a Nazi idea about a super race and a particular shade of whiteness. In the United States, in the history of the United States, at certain times, Irish, Germans, Jews, Italians, Spaniards, Hispanics, Slavs, and Greeks were not considered white at one stage in the history of immigration, and only recently, 50 years ago, did Asian Indians, were they considered to be white? Okay, so let's move on to perhaps a more modern notion of identity, and we'll connect that with with soccer and with the growing corporate nature of soccer. So here we get an overlap between support for a club and brand identity. This is Red Bull. Red Bull have, as you can see, they've got 4 teams there. Red Bull Leipzig, Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, and of course Red Bull New York, and also Red Bull Brazil. They actually have a 5th Red Bull, which is in Ghana. And notice the connection here. It's not just a brand, but it's also what's called content marketing. All right, so you support the team, you support Red Bull. Okay. The idea here is that fans no longer choose to support clubs based on family traditions or where you were born and brought up, geographic location. Fans choose clubs based on communities of taste, reinforced through global branding and consumption. And so very much that's the success of brands like Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City. They are put out there as being brands, global brands, that we can identify with or not. And in the case of Red Bull, of course, it's the branding overlaps with an actual product. And there's been lots of protests against Red Bull in Germany, against Red Bull Leipzig. In Germany, a lot of the structure of the clubs, the professional clubs is they're membership clubs. In fact, most of them are fan owned, and that's one of the reasons that you get this curious phenomena in English soccer. This happened about 8 years ago, and it suggests a backlash against this notion of corporate identity associated with these big soccer clubs. So I've taken this from the webpage of FC United of Manchester. And FC United of Manchester is a breakaway team from Manchester United. It was started by fans of Manchester United. And on their webpage, under history, they explain something about the reasons why they did this, why they broke away. So I'm going to read now. The club set up in protest to Malcolm Glazer's takeover of Manchester United is a statement often used to describe FC United. But while there is no doubt that FC would not have happened without the American invasion, it was the catalyst, the final straw, but not the sole reason. The material theft of a Manchester institution forcibly taken from the people of Manchester was the tip of a pyramid of destruction, with changing kick-off times for the benefit of television, soulless all-seater stadia full of new supporters intent to sit back and watch rather than partake in the occasion, heavy-handed stewarding and ridiculously priced tickets propping it all up. So this is a very big trend in British soccer. It's a reaction against the Premiership and the way that these clubs have lost their connection with the fans of many years ago, who were mainly working class and who stood and made a lot of noise, like Nick Hornby, and the present support for these clubs, which is mainly coming from middle class people who sit and do not make a noise. And it really becomes a brand identity rather than the very passionate way that Nick Hornby describes his allegiance to Arsenal in Fever Pitch. Okay, so let's conclude that. If you looked at, you filled in your little questionnaire there and decided which were the factors that most influence your particular identity, then you might have something like this. This was a survey of one particular class of students, and as you can see, the most important influence on identity here was family, and I guess language and nationality were kind of in second place, and religion then was in fourth. So interesting here that language is not the main force in terms of a person's identity. It's more to do with family, of course, and language ties with nationality. So, does your particular notion of who you are correspond to that, or do you have particular differences? What you'll notice, of course, is that your identity is not one of these. It is multiple, it's complex, and of course it may change at different times. So let's conclude with a quote from Kremsch, who talks about multiple cultural identities. So there's no one-to-one relationship between language and cultural identity. And let's quote now. Despite the entrenched belief in the one language equals one culture equation, individuals assume several collective identities that are likely not only to change over time in dialogue with us, but are liable to be in conflict with each other, with one another. And you could probably get the idea from Nick Hornby, his particular conflicts about identities. He loves being with the crowd. He loves being part of that hooligan crowd, but at the same time, he's not that kind of person. He's not a violent person. Okay, so let's conclude there